Hey guys, tonight we're heading west. You push open a pair of splintered, creaking saloon doors. They swing back behind you with a slow, ghostly motion. The air is heavy, thick with pipe smoke, sweaty flannel dust, and something overcooked. A tinkling piano tries to rise above the low murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, the squeal of chair legs on wood. All around, the scent of stale beer mingles with beans left too long in a soot-black kettle. The floor creaks beneath your boots, sticky in places from spilled syrup and even stickier in others for reasons you choose not to consider. You make it 3 feet inside before a man to your left coughs into his hand, then wipes it on his apron before serving someone a half-filled plate of what looks like old bacon and grayish gravy. The rules here are simple. If you can eat it, you paid for it. If you can't, you paid for it anyway. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love to see where and when folks are listening. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge farther in. The walls are unfinished pine, warped with time, scratched by boots and chairs, darkened by years of indoor pipe smoke. A narrow counter wraps around the left side of the room. Behind it stands a man with a thick beard and sweat pooling along his collar. He's ladling brownish stew from a black kettle into dented tin bowls. Steam rises lazily, catching glints from the oil lamp above. Next to him, a cracked slate board lists the evening's offerings: beans, bacon, hard biscuits, and something called stew. No further details given. Beneath it, a row of dusty bottles and an open sack of cornmeal. A card game stirs in the corner. One of the players bites into a wedge of smoked cheese, then seems to regret it. Another peels an orange brought in from the coast, a rare luxury, its sour scent cutting through the room's other aromas, like a warning. You reach the bar. The counter is worn smooth by years of elbows and spilled drinks. The edge near your hand bears a dark stain, molasses or blood. You don't ask. You sit on a stool uneven in height and lean forward. The barkeep gives you a glance, then a nod. From the corner of the bar, he pulls a small loaf of cornbread and sets it before you. It's dry, crumbling at the edges, and warm only near the center. The smell is faintly sweet, but also faintly smoky, like it spent time too close to the fire. You tear it in half and inspect the inside. Yellow, dense, a little grainy. A few kernels of unground corn dot the surface, one of them blackened from the pan. You chew. It scratches on the way down. Behind you, boots shuffle toward the piano. Someone drops a coin in a tin mug. The pianist obliges with a version of "Oh, Susanna," slowed by heat and fatigue. You notice the barkeep wiping the same glass over and over, using a rag already soaked through with dishwater and whiskey. The rag leaves streaks. The glass still smells like beef fat. You turn to the stew. It arrives in a dented bowl set on a mismatched plate. The contents are brown, viscous. You can't identify the meat, and you won't ask. A few potato fragments float near the surface. The broth is oily, shimmering beneath the low light. You lean in. It smells faintly of onion and something overcooked. Very overcooked. One spoonful in, and your jaw meets a tendon that hasn't given up. You chew slowly. Very slowly. Something crunches. Probably not a carrot. Probably not supposed to crunch at all. A man 2 stools over is eating salt pork straight from a block. No knife. Just pulling it apart with thick fingers. His teeth are dark from tobacco and stained with grease. He notices your stare and shrugs. Lunch, he says. Outside, the sound of hooves on dry dirt. A rider ties off his horse, then slaps dust from his coat before pushing through those swinging doors. The barkeep already knows what he wants: 2 biscuits, a strip of jerked beef, and a cup of whatever's brewing in that metal pot near the fire. The coffee smells like old boots, boiled for hours, strained through whatever cloth was available, then reheated throughout the day. You sip yours. It's bitter. Bitter like regret. Bitter like prairie loneliness in winter. The rider sits. He stares at his plate. The biscuits are round, pale, and slightly green at one edge. He eats them anyway. One crunches. He doesn't stop. You glance around the room again. A woman near the back table is nibbling a slice of dried apple. The color's gone. It's a dusky gray. She chews carefully, turning each bite over like it might contain a nail. It's not fear, it's experience. Somewhere in the rafters a fly buzzes lazily. It drifts down, lands on your cornbread, then leaves without tasting. The barkeep starts scrubbing a new dish with the same rag. Behind him, the small kitchen space is stacked with firewood tin buckets and sacks of flour. The flour's gone clumpy with moisture. You see something move inside one of the sacks. You stop looking. A man calls for whiskey. The barkeep pours it. A cloudy amber. He drinks it in one gulp and slams the glass down. It chips. He doesn't notice. Outside, the wind is picked up. You hear it push through the warped siding. The saloon groans, old boards flexing slightly in their nails. Dust sifts down from the ceiling. Nobody looks up. Back at your stool, the stew is cooling. The grease on top has formed a film. You break it with your spoon. A chunk of potato rises to the surface, then sinks again like a tired ship. This is food for people who don't have time to care, for drifters, for men who've ridden 50 miles through dry scrub with nothing but jerky and dreams, for women who've poured drinks for 16 hours and still have to eat something before collapsing in the room upstairs. You take another bite. It's not good, but it's warm. You stay seated, elbow against the bar, as the barkeep drags over a plate without a word. It's not yours. It's another order served to the heavy-set man who's just slouched onto the stool beside you. His coat smells of dust and horse. He grunts at the food without looking. On the plate sits a half slice of bread, more like a dense slab curved at the edges from being stored under pressure. There's bacon, too, if you can call it that. It's thin, wiry, and mostly rind. It curls in on itself like it's still resisting the fire. Grease pools under it. A fork pokes out of the mound, crooked at the tine. He digs in, chewing with a slow, mechanical rhythm, then washes it down with something dark and bitter. Coffee, you think. Possibly chicory. Possibly not coffee at all. You ask for the same. The barkeep gives you a nod, and slides over a new plate similar in appearance and aroma. Bacon, or at least a meat-like strip with vague pinks and deep browns. Beans on the side. Pinto, maybe. Cooked just long enough to hold shape, but still with a bit of grit. The seasoning salt if you're lucky. More likely it's just the taste of soot and thyme. The fork is heavy, tin or iron. You hold it like a small shovel and dig into the beans. They offer resistance. Not much, but enough to remind you these were boiled in haste. No hours-long simmer here. Just hot water smoke and whatever could be scraped from a barrel in the back. Historians still argue whether these beans were usually seasoned or just left plain. Some records show bits of salt pork added. Others mention leftover tallow or lard stirred in for texture. But no one agrees on whether they tasted like food or punishment. The man next to you finishes his bacon, then wipes his fingers on his pants. He burps long, slow, unapologetic. You sip your drink. It scalds your tongue. The barkeep says nothing but pours more. A few cowhands drift in. Dust follows them like a second skin. They crowd around a table near the door. Orders are shouted. Bacon, eggs if you got 'em. Coffee. And something for the horse. The barkeep grunts. One of them lights a stub of a cigar and blows smoke in every direction. Eggs, you think? That's a rarity. Most likely powdered or already green. Maybe both. You glance at your own plate again. The beans are cooling. The bacon's edges have hardened. The fat has congealed. You eat anyway. To your right, two men argue over which saloon serves the best biscuits between here and Tombstone. One claims the Dry Stack place near Fort Bowie has soft ones on Sundays. The other insists a bar in El Paso keeps them under damp cloth, making them almost chewable. Almost. You nod without joining in. A new plate slides down the bar. It holds a hill of mashed beans topped with a ladle of chili. The color's hard to define, somewhere between red and brown. A dollop of grease floats on top like a badge of honor. A fly lands near the rim, stumbles across the heat, and retreats. You take another sip. Your coffee's cooled just enough to taste the metal from the cup. A man walks in with a crate. The barkeep meets him, grunts, and exchanges a few coins. The crate's contents spill onto the counter onions. Small, dry, some sprouting green. The barkeep scoops them into a basket without inspection. One rolls off and lands near your foot. You leave it. Behind the bar, the fire crackles. A cast iron pan sizzles as new bacon hits the surface. Smoke climbs toward the low ceiling. The smell is sharp and fatty. It sticks to your clothes. It will follow you for days. You shift on your stool, feeling the fatigue in your legs. Your stomach isn't full, but it isn't empty either. That's about the best you can expect here. The barkeep notices your glance and gives you a half nod, sliding over a hard biscuit wrapped in linen that's been used too many times. You break it open. It crumbles like dry clay. No butter, no jam. Just dry, bland sustenance. You chew slowly. The sound it makes is louder than you'd expect. Across the room, someone coughs and mutters about needing real food. Another round of coffee is poured. A newcomer orders something from the back. "That thing you got Tuesday," he says. The barkeep frowns, disappears through the curtain, and returns with a plate of fried dough coated in what might be honey. The smell is sweet, but the dough is burnt in spots. The man eats it with enthusiasm. The barkeep sees your look and shrugs. Molasses batch went off. Used the top layer. You nod, though the explanation doesn't help. Out front, a horse neighs. The wind shifts. For a second, fresher air finds its way through the slatted windows. You inhale. It's fleeting. The saloon reclaims its odor quickly. Part bacon, part dust, part history. You glance at the bottles lining the back shelf. Not whiskey, not tonight. You point at one. The barkeep shakes his head. That's vinegar, he says, for the stew. You finish your biscuit and set the tin fork aside. Your hand leaves a print on the bar. You wipe it off. Behind you, someone drops a cup. It rolls, settles, then is ignored. A small boy enters from a side door. Maybe 10. Barefoot, dirty, carrying a tray of empty mugs. He slips behind the bar, stacks the mugs, and disappears again. Probably family. Probably working for stew and a cot near the stove. You sit in silence for a while. The room hums with background noise. Boots, voices, a snore in the corner. The pianist starts a slow waltz, only half remembering the tune. No one complains. The barkeep lights a new oil lamp. Shadows change. Dust motes drift lazily. Another man arrives asking for corned beef. The barkeep laughs once. Only got salt pork, he says. Corned's for the railmen. The man nods, accepts, and sits. Soon a plate appears. Salt pork, biscuit, cold beans. Your coffee is nearly gone. A ring marks the bar where the mug sat. You wipe it with your sleeve. The barkeep nods again. That's his version of thanks. Outside, the sun has dipped lower. Shadows stretch. Soon the kerosene lamps will flicker fully, and food service will give way to drink. You stretch your back and lean forward. Another plate arrives. More bacon, more beans. A routine, a ritual, just enough to keep going. You press your palms against the edge of the bar, shift your weight, and rise slowly. Your boots scuff the floor, the soles catching on a knot in the wood worn smooth from years of dragging feet. Behind you, someone grumbles about the meat. You're not surprised. The saloon's chalkboard menu changes once a week, maybe. The current list includes jackrabbit stew, buffalo roast, and boiled mutton, each scratched into the surface with a piece of pale chalk now resting on the counter. No prices, no guarantees. You shuffle closer to the kitchen curtain. The scent thickens. This time it's not just beans or bacon. There's something gamey in the air. Wild, metallic, and a little sour. Someone's boiling meat again. A plate lands on the nearest table, accompanied by a grunt. On it, a pile of stringy flesh, grayish-brown, swimming in thin broth. Bits of onion float along the edges. The man who ordered it tears off a piece with a spoon, chews once, and swallows. No expression. Jackrabbit stew. That's the guess. It could also be prairie dog. Hard to tell once it's cooked down. Historians still argue whether rabbit was actually a staple meat or just used when the larger cuts ran out. Some records from frontier towns suggest that jackrabbit was a regular appearance, but others claim it was a desperation meal, a stopgap until buffalo or deer could be brought in. What's known is that it was tough lean and needed long boiling, preferably with onions, turnips, or anything to soften the bite. You inch closer. The cook behind the curtain lifts a lid from a pot. steam rushes upward, bringing a mix of smells: meat, pepper, wood, ash, and something faintly sour. He stirs with a wooden paddle. The meat comes apart slowly but not completely. The bones are left splintered from the heat. Someone at the bar asks for the buffalo roast. The barkeep pauses, disappears behind the curtain, and returns with a plate carrying 3 slices. They're thick, dark, nearly black at the edges. The smell is strong, rich, almost smoky. But once you lean in, the truth hits. It's dry, like shoe leather soaked in broth, then left near the fire too long. You sit across from the man eating it. He doesn't use a knife. He gnaws. The texture is unmistakable. Buffalo meat was hearty, but without the fat content of beef. When roasted over an open fire, especially in a saloon kitchen with no temperature control, it hardened. Roasts weren't roasted like today, more likely slow-burned, flipped once, then hacked into chunks. If you were lucky, it came with a strip of drippings ladled over top. If you weren't, it cracked your molars. You notice the cook dragging a full shoulder into the back. It hangs from a hook. The meat still has bits of fur clinging to it. He doesn't flinch. He's done this before. You shift to another table. There sits a plate of mutton boiled to translucence. The fat has pooled in the corners, floating in shallow broth. A few peppercorns dot the surface, but they're decorative at best. A man prods the meat with a spoon, finds it unyielding, and tries again with a dull knife. The mutton gives in slowly, the fibers separating like dry straw. He dips a piece of biscuit into the liquid and eats without chewing. A woman nearby complains that her meat smells like a saddle. No one responds. Boiled mutton was common. Sheep were easier to raise than cattle in rocky soils, and wool was profitable. When the sheep aged past usefulness, they ended up in stews. The problem: old sheep meant tough meat. Saloon cooks boiled it for hours. The smell lingered, sometimes for days. You turn your attention to the corner table. A group of laborers just sat down. Their plates carry a mixture: jerky slices rehydrated in broth, crumbled salt pork, and what might be canned meat from back east. The labels on the cans are long gone. They eat anyway. One of them spits a bone into his napkin. He jokes that it was squirrel. No one laughs. It might have been. You trace the room's odors again. Burnt fat, acrid grease, faint vinegar. Behind it all, the constant undercurrent of dried meat brought in by wagon. When the train started running, saloons near the rail lines got lucky fresh beef, sometimes even pork. But in towns like this, meat was what you caught, shot, raised, or rehydrated. A man approaches the bar with a sack. Inside are quail. Small, feathered, caught that morning. He barters with the cook 3 birds for 2 plates and a pint of whiskey. The cook accepts, sets the sack by the door, and tosses a few coins onto the counter. In the back, he preps the first one. Feathered, gutted, scorched over an open flame. No seasoning, no sauce. Just blackened skin and steam rising from the split cavity. He sets it on a plate with cold beans. That's the meal. You watch the customer pick it apart with his fingers. Tiny bones crack. The meat is barely enough for a bite. Some saloons tried adding sauces, tomato if they had any, or vinegar mixed with lard. But most times meat was served plain. You had to chew through the sinew yourself. You glance around. Every plate tells a story. Burnt edges, bone shards, teeth marks. It's not pretty, but it's filling. Most nights. The barkeep returns with another order of buffalo roast. The customer winces at the texture but eats it anyway. You notice him pocket a piece of bone, probably to chew later or boil for soup. Back near the fire, the cook pulls a small hunk of meat from a pan. He presses it with a spoon. Blood seeps up. He nods. That's done. You wonder if it's venison. Historians still argue whether venison was a staple in saloon kitchens. Deer were plentiful near forested towns but harder to preserve and more dangerous to hunt. Records from Kansas suggest some saloons served it roasted or dried, while others relied on tinned imports. No consensus exists. What's clear is that when you got venison, it was either tender from fresh kill or dry enough to split a tooth. You stretch your neck and glance toward the door. More customers are arriving. The sun's nearly gone, and the night crew is settling in. That means more orders, more stew, more meat with no name. A boy walks in with a crate. Inside, small game squirrels, a raccoon, maybe even a hare. The barkeep doesn't ask questions. He pays cash. The crate goes to the back. You adjust your seat. There's more meat coming. Always is. You stay seated at the warped table legs braced against uneven floorboards, staring at your mostly empty plate. A few beans remain, some fused to the metal like barnacles on a rusted hull. You scrape them off with the back of your spoon. The sound rings sharp against the low thrum of conversation and piano strings. The beans are the one certainty in any Wild West saloon meal. They arrive whether you ask for them or not. You could walk in demanding roast chicken and hotcakes and still find your plate anchored by a heap of beans, kidney pinto, or navy depending on what the supply wagon dropped off last. They come in every texture, mushy, chalky, firm, crunchy, and every shade of brown. Some are so bland you question whether they've been soaked in plain water for a week. Others have a faint metallic twang, like they shared a pot with corroded tin. You take another spoonful. These are on the firm side. Maybe a little undercooked. Maybe no one stirred the pot today. Historians still argue whether beans were always cooked from dry, or if saloons ever used canned versions. The latter were expensive, shipped from Chicago or St. Louis, and most saloon keepers didn't like paying freight on something they could prepare themselves in a soot-covered pot over a wood fire. Still, a few upscale establishments near the railroad lines might have offered the canned kind soft seasoned with that slight sweet tang from the preserving brine. Not here, though. Your beans have grit, literal grit, the kind that crunches between your molars. Either the sack wasn't rinsed properly, or ash from the fire drifted into the pot again. You chew, slowly, swallow with care. To your left, a miner picks through his own pile. He's using a fork, working bean by bean, frowning at the texture. His plate includes a few strips of tough bacon, but mostly it's beans. A small biscuit sits untouched, slowly hardening with exposure. He mutters, "They taste green." No one disagrees. In the back, the cook lifts the lid on a new pot. Steam billows up, fogging the small window nearby. A man squints through the cloud, trying to see what's inside. Beans again. Of course. The scent confirms it, earthy, warm, a little sour. The cook ladles out a scoop. The beans slide into the next dish with a wet slap. No garnish, no seasoning. Just beans. Always beans. You try to recall the last time you ate something without them. Even the stews here are just beans, dressed up with broth and hope. A cowboy steps inside, claps dust from his boots, and requests the usual. The barkeep pours him coffee, then gestures to a plate already waiting. Beans, biscuit, chunk of salt pork. He nods, sits, and begins eating before his coat is fully off. There's a strange rhythm to the eating bite, chew, sip, stare. Bite, chew, sip. Silence fills the gaps between spoonfuls. It's not boredom. It's resignation. Everyone here understands what beans mean. You don't have to talk about it. They've been cooked over flames too hot, stirred too little, seasoned too randomly. Sometimes a lump of lard gets tossed in for flavor. Sometimes a strip of dried beef. Rarely there's onion. Rarer still chili powder or vinegar. But usually it's just beans. Bulk calories. You glance at the barrel in the corner. It's marked in fading paint. Beans U.S. The lid is ajar. Inside, a scoop handle sticks out like the mast of a buried ship. The boy returns from the back room carrying 2 metal bowls. He sets them down at the far table. More beans. The men don't even look. They just eat. You watch another customer struggle with his portion. The beans are too dry. He pours some coffee over them to soften things. It helps barely. At the next table, someone adds whiskey instead. The smell is strange, but no one objects. There's a saying carved into the wall, faint beneath layers of dust. If you don't like beans, ride on. The letters are uneven. The tool used to etch them, likely the same knife once used to cut bacon and scrape grease from plates. Beans in the Wild West weren't just food, they were filler. Easy to store, easy to cook in large batches, and cheap to ship. Saloons counted on them. They could stretch a single plate into something vaguely resembling a meal. Even if everything else ran out meat, biscuits, butter, there'd be beans. You push your spoon around the plate. Some are split open, revealing soft, pale insides. Others remain whole, unyielding. You bite one. It crunches. You chew again, slower this time. A dog barks outside. Hooves scuffle on dry dirt. The wind kicks dust against the wall, but no one flinches. The cook drops more beans into another pot. He adds water from a dented pitcher, stirs with a long spoon, then sprinkles in something dark. Could be pepper, could be leftover coffee grounds. He doesn't label things. A newcomer walks in, hopeful. He asks for stew bread and anything not made of beans. The barkeep snorts. "Hopes for Sundays," he replies. The man nods and sits. His plate arrives. It's beans. Of course. You reach the bottom of your dish. The last few cling to the metal. You scrape them free, chew with effort, then set your spoon aside. The barkeep offers more. You shake your head. Enough beans for now. You stay seated for a while longer, hands resting on the edge of the table, eyes drifting toward the corner where a crate of bread loaves sits under a threadbare cloth. A stray beam of light filters through the dusty window slats, catching the coarse surface of the topmost loaf. It looks dry. Dry in a way that makes your mouth feel parched just looking at it. You rise, walk slowly across the warped floorboards, and gesture toward the barkeep for a slice. He nods, reaches down, and pulls up one of the loaves with a slight grunt. The knife he uses isn't sharp. It's more of a wedge dragged across the crust with effort. A wedge-shaped chunk breaks free its edges, crumbling as he hands it to you on a tin saucer. You carry it back to your seat and inspect the bread. It's coarse, yellowish, uneven. No two slices here ever look the same. You press a finger into it. There's some give, but not much. The outer edge flakes off in dry crumbs. The inside is dense, heavy, and cold to the touch. You bite into it slowly. It's cornbread. Or it's supposed to be. The texture tells you everything stone-ground cornmeal, probably no wheat flour mixed in, and definitely no butter. Maybe a pinch of lard. Maybe. The sweetness is faint, barely there. What dominates instead is grit. You chew slowly, carefully. One kernel hasn't been ground all the way and crunches between your molars like gravel. Cornbread in the Wild West was a staple but rarely refined. Historians still argue whether it was made fresh each day or simply baked in large batches and left out until someone asked for it. Some accounts claim it was soft, sweet, and golden. Others describe it like you're tasting now, dry, brittle, and barely held together by overworked eggs and guesswork. A man near the window mutters to no one in particular, "Bread like this could stop a bullet." You wouldn't be surprised. Across the saloon, someone's trying to dip their bread into a mug of coffee to soften it. The bread holds together at first, then collapses in a soggy clump. He eats it anyway. You look back at your own piece. There's no butter, of course. Butter was expensive. It spoiled fast. The saloon hasn't had any in weeks, maybe months. Sometimes a thin smear of pork fat was used instead, softened over the fire, brushed on with whatever tool was handy. Today, there's nothing. Just dry bread. Barely sweet, barely moist. More function than flavor. You remember hearing someone once call it journey bread, the kind that lasts, that doesn't go soft after a day in the saddlebag, but also the kind that takes water with every bite. And a strong jaw. You sip your coffee. It helps. On a table nearby, a pair of travelers break open a different loaf hardtack. Not common in saloons, but sometimes served when flour was short and biscuit dough wouldn't rise. This one's square, pale, and pocked with tiny holes. The man knocks it against the table. It makes a hollow sound, like tapping a plank. He breaks it in half with a rock. Not a joke. An actual rock. Hardtack was military fare, but it drifted west with veterans and supply traders. It lasted forever. It had to. One man claimed to eat a piece 10 years old, though he boiled it first. You glance back to your cornbread. It's dry again. Already cooling. You chew another bite slowly, then use the last of your coffee to wash it down. The barkeep wipes the counter with his usual rag. He glances at your plate. "Need another slice?" he asks. You shake your head. On the back counter, the cook tries a different tactic, frying bread. He's taken a slab of yesterday's loaf, dropped it into a pan with leftover bacon grease, and pressed it flat with a spatula. The smell improves. Slightly. Grease helps everything. He flips it, then plates it with a dollop of beans. The customer eats fast, tearing into the crust with yellowed teeth, grease lining his lips. Fried bread wasn't common, but when it happened, it was usually a sign that the bread was near its end. Cracked, stale, crumbling. Heat and fat brought it back to life for a while. Next to you, someone asks about biscuits. The barkeep shrugs. "Gone by noon," he says, "unless you want 'em green." The customer laughs and walks out. You think about the biscuits you've seen in here before, flat, uneven, and more salt than flour. Sometimes they're soft, but mostly they're dense. When fresh, they break apart with a clean tear. When old, they break apart like stone. A few customers bring their own additions, jam jars, molasses, tins. You've seen them unwrap a biscuit and slather it with syrup so thick it doesn't move. One man even carried pepper jelly in his coat pocket. He was from somewhere far east, judging by the way he said breakfast. The cornbread before you is nearly gone now. A few crumbs cling to the plate static from dryness. You drag your finger across and taste what's left. Dusty. Stale. But filling. Outside, the sun shifts again. Shadows move along the plank floor. The wind changes direction, and for a second you think you smell something sweet. Then it's gone. The cook returns with a pan of new loaves. He sets them on the windowsill to cool. The tops are cracked and brown. One loaf has split down the middle from overbaking. Steam curls from the seam like smoke from a burned book. You take one last sip of coffee and watch as another customer receives a fresh slice, piping hot, still steaming, just barely moist. She tears it in half, blows on it, then eats with a slowness that suggests relief. For a few moments the saloon is quiet. No orders, no complaints. Just chewing. Bread may not be a feast, but when it's hot, it almost feels like kindness. You sit a moment longer, letting the heaviness of dry bread settle in your stomach when the barkeep wordlessly refills your cup. The coffee sloshes inside the dented mug, dark and hot. You lift it, slowly inhale. It smells bitter, stronger now, as if the bottom of the pot has steeped long enough to melt iron. You sip. It burns slightly. Still, it's better than the other drinks you've seen served here. You glance to your left. A man holds a glass of amber liquid. He tips it back, grimaces, and exhales. The smell drifts your way, sharp, chemical, unmistakably cheap. Rot gut whiskey, or something like it. You watch him set the glass down. The rim is chipped. The barkeep shrugs and wipes it with that same damp rag before refilling. In saloons like this, drinks beyond whiskey were limited, improvised, and often dangerous. Anything fermented would do. If it burned on the way down, it was considered clean enough. Historians still argue whether many saloons actually served what they claimed. Labels didn't mean much. Whiskey could be anything from corn alcohol mixed with burnt sugar to industrial cleaner dyed with tobacco juice. One account from Nevada mentions a man going blind after a single night of drinking rail gin. He called it white lightning with nails in it. You glance behind the bar. No brand names, no printed signs. Just dark bottles, reused jugs, unlabeled corked flasks. One is filled with a reddish liquid that clings to the glass like syrup. The barkeep pours a small dose into a chipped shot glass, sets it in front of a customer, and walks away without a word. The customer sniffs it, pauses, then drinks. He doesn't flinch. That's usually a bad sign. You turn back to your coffee. The edge of your mug is warm from your hand. The heat's fading. The bitterness remains. A younger man near the center table requests a sarsaparilla. The barkeep raises an eyebrow but obliges. He pulls a bottle from under the counter, wipes the dust from the top, and uncorks it with a pop that sounds a little too weak. He pours the contents into a tall glass. It fizzes faintly, then stops. The man drinks, smacks his lips, and frowns. Flat, he mutters. But he finishes it anyway. Sarsaparilla was a rare find. Mostly brought in by freight wagons from bigger towns. It came in glass bottles packed in straw, labeled with peeling ink, and tasted like licorice and river water. Sometimes it was sweet, sometimes it wasn't. You remember reading about one saloon in Cheyenne that specialized in root tonics, medicinal drinks made from local herbs, sugar, and a generous splash of alcohol. Customers claimed it helped with digestion. It probably just dulled the symptoms. The man across the room stands, walks to the counter, and orders another. The barkeep nods, but doesn't pour. Last one, he says. Rest cracked in the crate. The younger man sighs and accepts a mug of black coffee instead. To your right, a woman seated alone sips from a ceramic cup. You can smell the contents from here: hot water, lemon peel, maybe a cinnamon stick. A rare touch of gentleness in this otherwise harsh setting. You glance again at your coffee. Lukewarm now. You drink it anyway. The piano man shifts his tune, dragging out slow chords. His glass rests on the corner of the keys, half full of something yellowish and thin. Probably corn liquor. Some saloons served that more than whiskey. Easier to distill. Cheaper to make. Unregulated. A few drops of turpentine made it kick harder. A slice of fruit covered the taste. If fruit wasn't available, molasses worked barely. The barkeep pours another glass. You hear the liquid splash thickly. It's not a clean sound, more like syrup hitting metal. The customer sips it slow, grimacing. You lean back and look around. No one drinks water here. You haven't seen a single glass of it since you arrived. That's not an oversight, it's survival. Water came from wells barrels or creeks. Most of it carried sand algae or worse. Even boiling didn't fix it. Whiskey, even the bad kind, was safer. Some travelers carried their own canteens. Others paid extra for coffee simply because it came hot. You once heard a man say that if the drink didn't steam, he didn't trust it. The barkeep brings out a new jug. The label is faded, but you catch a word apple. He uncorks it. The scent rises fast. Sharp, fermented, slightly sweet. Applejack. A kind of frontier cider that's been freeze-distilled or aged too long. It's stronger than it smells, and often more dangerous. You watch the man who ordered it take a sip, then blink hard. He sets the glass down and breathes through his nose for several seconds. He's still upright. That's a win. You glance toward the window. Outside, a man pulls a bottle from his saddlebag, takes a swig, and returns it. Even travelers keep their own stash. Trusting a saloon's menu was a risk. Back inside the room hums. The piano continues. Mugs clink. A man coughs near the door, then calls for coffee and whatever's clean. The barkeep chuckles. That'd be the broom. The man nods, drinks what's served anyway. You swirl your cup. Just grounds now. A dark sludge at the bottom. You consider ordering something stronger, then decide against it. The barkeep raises a brow as if to ask. You shake your head. He nods once and moves on. You place your mug down. The cup is warm. That's enough. The piano man takes a break. His fingers stiffen. His shoulders slump. He reaches down and retrieves a tin of chewing tobacco, tapping it against his knee. The music fades, and in its place rises the murmur of stories, the scrape of cutlery and the soft clink of bottles shifting behind the bar. You lean forward. Gaze drifting toward the far end of the counter. That's where the barkeep usually stores the rare goods. You notice a small wooden crate lined with straw. Inside are a few tin cans and a tightly sealed glass jar. One of the regulars glances over, sees your interest, and speaks without being asked. "Oysters," he says, nodding toward the crate. You blink. He grins barely. "From the coast. Canned, not fresh. Came in with the last wagon 2 weeks back. Oysters. Here. Hundreds of miles from any ocean." You try to imagine the journey caught on the Pacific coast, packed in brine, sealed in metal, shipped by rail, then wagon, then finally dragged into this fly-buzzing saloon to rest beside the beans and bacon. He adds cost about as much as a saddle. Taste like pennies. You nod slowly. Imported luxuries weren't for flavor. They were for show. They proved you had coin to burn and didn't mind using it. They also proved that this saloon, despite its warped floorboards and creaking chairs, had some connection to the outside world. Another man at the corner table opens a tin of peaches. He does it with a small folding knife, slow and careful. The lid lifts with a metallic creak. Inside, pale orange slices swim in thick syrup. He spoons them out one by one. No one asks for a taste. Everyone just watches. The sweetness fills the room. It cuts through the bean fat and sweat. It feels foreign. Canned peaches, historians say, were a prized delicacy in the frontier. Some claim they were used to pay off debts or bribe officials. Others say they were hoarded in back rooms and only opened when someone was dying or celebrating. The debate continues over how frequently they appeared in places like this. What's clear is that when you had them, you remembered it. The man finishes his tin. He licks the spoon clean, folds the lid back over the rim, and pockets the can. "Keepsake, maybe." You ask the barkeep about fruit. He shrugs. "Sometimes we get dried apples. Raisins, maybe. Canned pears if the freight makes it." You glance at the shelf behind him. Sure enough, there's a dusty jar label, long gone, contents slightly cloudy. You can't tell what's inside. Could be plums, could be prunes. A woman near the fireplace has a china plate, not tin, not iron. Porcelain chipped, but still whole. On it, a slice of something pale and soft. She cuts it slowly. A hush falls over the nearby tables. Someone whispers, "Cake." She takes a bite, chews carefully, and nods once to herself. The cake is rare. Flour, eggs, sugar, all hard to come by in reliable amounts. Some frontier bakers managed sponge cakes using sour milk and ash-baked tins. Others settled for heavy, fruit-laden bricks that traveled well but tasted like damp lumber. The one she eats now is somewhere in between. You ask the barkeep where it came from. He gestures toward a folded note tacked beside the mirror. Martha's birthday. She made it herself. That explains the quiet. Someone coughs near the back, trying not to look too eager. She finishes the slice and wraps the remainder in cloth. It disappears into her coat. Imported sweets weren't just food, they were events. You didn't ask for them, you witnessed them. A cowboy enters and sets a bottle on the bar. The label reads, "Maple syrup, real maple doubtful. Probably sorghum or molasses colored and corked." Still, he treats it like treasure. He pours a small drizzle over a biscuit and eats it slowly, head tilted back, savoring each bite. The barkeep watches him without interrupting. Everyone else looks away. Even molasses was an indulgence out here. It hardened in cold weather, leaked in warm, and took on the flavor of every barrel it passed through. But it turned hard-tack into candy, and that was enough. To your right, a merchant wipes down a small tin tray. On it, 3 pieces of chocolate, wrapped in paper, dark, shiny, dense. No one speaks. He unwraps one, bites into it, and closes his eyes. Chocolate in the West. Extremely rare. Shipped from Far East, sometimes even from Europe. Most travelers never saw it. Those who did often claimed it tasted like chalk. But this one looks fresh. Someone paid dearly for it. He doesn't offer to share. No one asks. You sip what remains of your coffee. It tastes bland, now weak in comparison. The richness of imported goods, even if poorly preserved, always overwhelmed everything else. Behind the barkeep uncorks a new bottle. Clear glass, pale liquid. He pours it into a wine glass, chipped delicate. Sets it in front of an older man with silver hair and a limp. The man nods. "Brandy," he says softly. You smell it from where you sit. Sweet, fruity, strong. Someone whispers, "He's from back east." It explains a lot. Brandy was the last thing you expected to see here. Imported from France, maybe. More likely made in St. Louis, aged in barrels for a few weeks and poured into bottles with fancy names. It didn't matter. The word was enough. The old man drinks slowly. No one bothers him. A dog barks again outside. A wagon passes. Dust trails follow. Inside, the saloon returns to its rhythm: coffee beans, salt pork biscuits. But that crate of luxuries still sits near the counter, daring someone to reach for it. The barkeep closes the lid, sets a boot on top, and leans there. "No more tonight," he says. And just like that, the moment ends. You finish your drink. You won't taste peaches here again for a long time. The buzz of conversation returns to its low, steady hum. Someone clears his throat. A chair scrapes back. You hear the slap of cards, shuffled at the back table, a familiar rhythm that blends into the evening's quiet. You push your empty mug aside and glance toward the rear doorway behind the bar, where the swinging curtain hides the heart of the operation. You rise slowly and take a few steps in that direction. No one stops you. No one ever does, as long as you aren't carrying a bucket or asking for credit. The barkeep barely looks up. You brush past the curtain. The kitchen, if it can be called that, is dimly lit, warm, and loud in its own way. A central fire pit glows from beneath a warped iron grate, orange flames licking the underside of a cast iron pot. It's the same pot you've seen served from since you arrived. Around it, pans hang on nails. Shelves sag beneath the weight of dented cans and stained sacks of grain. The cook stands near the heat, his shirt soaked through at the back, his sleeves rolled up past elbows, darkened with soot and grease. His hands work without pause, chopping, stirring, scraping. He doesn't look at you. You're not the first to wander back here. A flat iron pan sizzles nearby. In it, something unidentifiable is frying, possibly potatoes, though their shape is too soft, their edges too vague. You catch a glimpse of lard smoking at the edges. The cook nudges it with a metal spatula blackened from years of fire. This kitchen is a natural descendant of the chuck wagon. Same tools, same food, same rules. You notice the metal rack on the far wall. On it, hang several tin cups, all scratched and dented. A rusted ladle dangles from a hook beside a burlap bag labeled lard. The label is barely legible. A mouse hole chews through one corner. It's been patched with twine. To your right, an open wooden crate holds potatoes. Most are shriveled. A few have sprouted. One is half green. He'll use them all. Chuck wagon-trained cooks learned to make do with what was left. They brought that same grit into saloon kitchens when they hung up their saddles. They didn't aim for flavor. They aimed for survival. The cook opens a small drawer and removes a piece of dried meat. He drops it into a boiling pot. The water darkens instantly, the smell lifting fast salt smoke age. Probably beef. Maybe not. You recognize the rhythm now. Meat boiled until soft. Beans cooked until dry. Bread scorched until firm. Repeat. A pan on the back burner simmers quietly. A lid rattles. The cook lifts it to peek. It's a stew, mostly grease and gravy. You can make out carrot slices, barely orange. They float between chunks of something gray and boneless. Likely yesterday's meat rehydrated. He reaches for a spice tin, opens it, taps it once. No visible change. No scent. Possibly empty. He sets it down without comment. You take a step closer and spot a row of utensils lined up beside the stove. A meat cleaver with a chipped blade, a wooden spoon charred at the end, a potato masher twisted at the handle. Nothing here is new. Everything has history scraped, warped, burned. The oven, if you can call it that, is a metal box built into the hearth. Black soot coats the interior. A slab of bread bakes directly on the stone base. The crust darkens, unevenly bubbling where fat has spilled from the previous loaf. Flies hover near the door. The cook swats without looking. You ask how long he's worked here. He mutters something about a stretch, then says nothing more. His hands don't stop moving. He pours the stew into a dented bowl, sprinkles dried herbs, parsley, or maybe dried lettuce flakes, and hands it off to a boy who enters silently, grabs the dish, and disappears. The cook wipes his hands on a dark cloth. The cloth leaves a smear on the wall when he tosses it aside. Next to the hearth, you spot a slab of bacon hanging from a hook. It's gray at the edges. A small knife rests beneath it on a plate. The knife's edge is bent slightly, likely from constant use. The barkeep probably slices from that same slab 20 times a day. In a crate under the counter you spot onions. Sprouting. Soft, but usable. Next to them a half block of cheese. Green fuzz lines one edge. The rest is firm. He'll scrape the mold, use the rest. That's the rule. On a shelf above the fire, a pot of lard. Pale solidified at the top, softening beneath the heat. He stirs it occasionally and uses it for nearly everything. Beans, bread, meat, grease for pans. Chuck wagon cooking wasn't clean. It wasn't fresh. It was efficient. It was about what could survive in a barrel or a sack for 2 weeks at a time in desert heat or mountain cold. The saloon kitchen honors that legacy. You ask him what's for tomorrow. He shrugs. Depends what's still good. That's not a joke. That's the menu. You look around once more. The walls are stained. The shelves sag. The air smells like wood smoke and salt meat. But everything has a place. The tools are arranged in their usual disorder. The fire crackles, the stew bubbles, a loaf of bread hisses in the oven's heat. The cook wipes his brow with the back of his wrist, lifts a skillet, and starts again. The next meal's already underway. Always is. You step out from behind the curtain, returning to the saloon's main room. The light feels dimmer now, your eyes adjusting again. A few tables have emptied. Some customers have left to tend their horses, or maybe to find sleep. Others remain nursing drinks, gnawing on what's left of their meals, or staring into the fire like it owes them an answer. You walk slowly past the bar, past the stove, and make your way toward a side alcove where a second curtain hangs. You part it and look inside. This is where the food is made, not just served. The true kitchen. No customers allowed technically, but no one stops you. It's smaller than you expected. Narrow, hot, cramped. A single oil lamp flickers in the corner. It casts shadows over the soot-stained walls and bounces across metal surfaces dulled by time and heat. You take a breath. The smell here is stronger, more concentrated. This is where the meat burns and the beans stew. This is where grease turns to smoke and onions turn to mush. You look around. There's no counter, no cutting board. Just a rough wooden table slick with lard ringed with old knife marks. The surface tilts slightly. A bucket beneath one edge catches runoff. It's nearly full. You don't look inside. A large kettle rests on a brick platform supported by an iron frame blackened with soot. Flames lick the bottom, kept alive by stacked logs cut unevenly and haphazardly piled nearby. Smoke drifts upward, gathering in the rafters. There's no chimney, just a hole near the roofline cut years ago and never fixed. The cook enters behind you, carrying a pan filled with what looks like chopped meat. He drops it into the kettle without ceremony. The water hisses. Fat rises. He stirs once, then steps back. He grabs another pot and sets it on a smaller grate where the fire is gentler. Into it he pours a mix of chopped vegetables, onions, carrots, maybe something leafy. A splash of lard follows. Then salt. He doesn't measure. He just knows. You watch his hands. They're steady. Cracked, stained, old. But steady. The cast iron pans in the corner are stacked by size. Their surfaces are slick with years of grease. One is bent at the edge. Another has a small hole filled with lead. They're not clean, not shiny, but they're seasoned. The kind of tools that don't fail even when everything else does. You look down at the floor. It's packed dirt, covered in grease spots, charred wood chips, and crumbs. A trail of flour runs from the table to the oven like a map of past mistakes. You move toward the back wall. There, against the boards, is a rack. Hooks dangle from it, each one holding something: a cleaver, a spoon, a two-pronged fork, a long-handled ladle. They're mismatched. Some rusted, some carved with initials. One is wrapped in twine to keep the handle from splitting. On a shelf beneath it, a small sack of salt. Next to it, a jar of what might be dried herbs. Hard to tell. No labels. The cook lifts the kettle's lid. Steam gushes out, wetting the ceiling boards. He sniffs once, nods to himself, then drops in a bone, bare, white, cracked. He notices you watching. He speaks. Yesterday's soup, he says. Today's stew. You nod. That's how it works. He opens the oven, a square box built into the bricks, inside a pan of bread. The crust is dark. The surface cracked. He slides it out with a metal paddle, sets it on the table. Steam rises. You glance over his shoulder. In the corner sits a small pile of pans waiting to be cleaned. Their surfaces are black, their edges warped. A dented tin bowl rests on top, still half filled with something congealed. He'll clean it eventually with hot water sand and a rag that's never really dry. No soap. Soap is for Sunday. Maybe. He lifts a cast-iron skillet from the wall and places it over the fire. Adds fat. Waits. Then he cracks 2 eggs, one with a blood spot, the other with a double yolk. He doesn't flinch. Just stirs them together with a spoon darkened from years of use. You watch as he grabs a long wooden stick and nudges the fire, sending sparks up into the smoke. The flames roar for a moment, then settle. The kitchen settles with them. You turn to the right. A stack of firewood leans against the wall. The ends are splintered, the bark half stripped. Above them, a hanging basket filled with dried herbs, sage maybe, or mint. They're brittle, more decorative than useful now. He plucks a few leaves and crumbles them into a bowl. Then he adds boiling water, tea, or a version of it. He drinks from a cup carved from horn. You've seen it before. It's his. No one else touches it. You back away slightly, your feet crunching on bits of cracked cornmeal scattered across the floor. This kitchen isn't clean, it isn't modern, it isn't safe. But it works. Meal after meal, hour after hour, it works. The fire stays lit. The pans stay hot. The food keeps coming. No one asks for more than that. No one expects it. You step out from the kitchen and return to your seat near the wall, your body heavier from the heat, your nose filled with the mixture of wood smoke, boiled meat, and fried lard. The saloon has quieted slightly. Some plates have been cleared. Others still hold scraps, cold beans, torn bread crusts, forgotten bits of meat. A dog wanders through the open doorway, sniffs near a boot, and is quietly shooed away. You glance toward the far corner where a wooden door leads to the storeroom. It's propped open, and for the first time you can see inside. The room is narrow and cool, shaded from the sun by thick walls and burlap curtains tacked over narrow windows. You walk toward it slowly. The air changes as you step inside, still warm, but different. It smells like dust and pepper-dry cheese and vinegar. This is the saloon's pantry, the final resting place for supplies too valuable to waste and too limited to trust with carelessness. You look around. Sacks of dried goods line the left wall, each one closed with rope or folded down and weighted by stones. The largest are marked with fading letters: flour, beans, salt. You touch one of the flour sacks. The cloth is coarse. Your fingers pick up a trace of fine dust, warm and gritty. A mouse hole gapes near the bottom. A piece of tin has been hammered over it, held in place with 4 mismatched nails. To your right, shelves hold an arrangement of jars and crates. Dried apples in one jar, shriveled nearly to leather. A stack of preserved lemons sits nearby, their skins wrinkled, their liquid cloudy. You lift one jar slightly. The bottom is sticky. You set it down. On the top shelf, wheels of cheese. Hard, dry, aged to the point of necessity. The rinds are dark-crusted. One wheel is wrapped in cloth that's grown stiff with time. Another is exposed green fuzz collecting at the edge. You reach for it. It crumbles at your touch. This cheese isn't for slicing. It's for shaving over beans into stew onto bread. A few curls can stretch flavor over a whole week's worth of blandness. One wheel could feed a saloon for days. Below a wooden crate filled with dried meats, strips of jerky hard as wood. The colors range from dark brown to gray. Some still have a faint pepper coating. Others are plain. You pick one up and bend it, it doesn't give. Dried meat was a necessity on the frontier. Historians agree it was the best way to preserve food without refrigeration. But they disagree on the exact process. Some say salt and smoke were enough. Others mention ash vinegar or buried barrels. No consensus, just evidence of chewing and long nights. The crate beside the jerky holds rock salt, heavy chunks like crystals, used to cure meat flavor beans or scrub pans. One piece is carved with a shallow scoop. You guess someone used it to stir soup. On another shelf, a few tin cans. Their labels are mostly peeled. One reads tomatoes. The lid is bulging, probably botulism. The cook will likely use it anyway. Next to the cans, a small keg of vinegar. The cork is stained. A wooden ladle leans against it. You can smell the sharpness from here. Vinegar was the secret weapon. For pickling, for cleaning, for softening tough meat. Sometimes even for drinking mixed with sugar and water. A poor man's lemonade. Sour enough to make your eyes water, but cold on a hot day. In the far corner, a stack of burlap sacks tied with string. You lift one slightly. Inside oats. Another dried corn. A third, what might be lentils or split peas. You run your hand through the opening. Dry, clean, still usable. You turn to face the door. On a small hook, a smoked ham hangs in the air. It's dark, hard, and glistens slightly. A knife rests beneath it. The edge is curved, the blade darkened. It's been used many times. Beneath the ham, a wooden barrel marked pickles. You lift the lid. The brine is cloudy. Inside, a few floating cucumbers, soft at the edges. You put the lid back gently. Pickled anything was a luxury. Kept food edible. Added acid to otherwise bland meals. Turned dry bread into something you could chew again. You glance upward. From the ceiling hang ropes tied around dried herbs. Sage, rosemary, maybe thyme, not for flavor, for masking. The difference between meat and rot is thin. A sprinkle of dried leaves helps. A box near the window holds eggs brown speckled, slightly dusty. One is cracked. You lift it and see the white has begun to leak. You let it be. You spot an oilskin pouch in the back. It's folded carefully. Inside are peppercorns. Another pouch holds cinnamon. You smell it, faintly warm sweet out of place. Someone brought it from far away, maybe for a special dish. Or maybe for trade. The final shelf holds a tin of lye soap. Not for hands. For pans. For knives. For scrubbing stubborn plates. It smells harsh but effective. You step back from the shelf and look around once more. Everything here is old. Everything here is reused. Nothing is wasted. This is where the meals begin, not with recipes, but with what hasn't spoiled, with what can still be boiled, scraped, stewed, or salted. It's not a pantry. It's a survival plan. You leave the storeroom, stepping back into the saloon's haze of tobacco smoke and slow conversation. The shift in air is immediate. The cool stillness of dry goods and vinegar barrels gives way to the warm, greasy haze of the dining floor. You move back toward your table, brushing past chairs, boots, and hunched shoulders. As you sit again, your attention drifts to the tools in use, not just the food, but what prepares it. The implements of the saloon kitchen are not elegant, not sharp, not new. They're practical, scarred, worn smooth in the grip. You glance toward the service counter, where the cook has laid out a new set of utensils for the evening meal. Closest to the fire is the cast iron skillet. Its wide, heavy, blackened through years of direct heat. The sides are chipped where it was dropped, maybe kicked. You can tell it never leaves the kitchen. It lives on the fire over the coals, absorbing decades of grease and ash. The skillet's surface gleams not from polish, but from fat. Layers of pork drippings, cornmeal dust, and soot have sealed it like armor. A good skillet like this is never washed, never scrubbed clean, just wiped and reused. Maybe a rinse if something stuck too hard. But soap, never. Beside it rests a ladle, long-handled, forged in one piece. The bowl is shallow. The edge is dented from banging against the rim of iron pots. You watch as the cook dips it into a bubbling pot of beans, then taps it sharply against the side. Steam rises. A trickle of dark liquid spills back into the kettle. Next comes the meat cleaver. It lies flat across a chopping board that isn't a board at all, but a thick slab of pine darkened nearly to black. The cleaver is heavy curved with a wooden handle that's been wrapped in wire to keep the grip from splitting further. You notice notches in the blade. They weren't made by vegetables. Bones did that. Often, the cleaver doesn't slice, it bludgeons. You've seen it used to have a frozen ham, to break through the knuckles of a cow's foot, to shave jerky thin enough to soak. Historians still argue whether frontier kitchens were supplied with actual butcher tools or simply repurposed farm equipment. Some claim cleavers were custom-made. Others insist they were just repurposed mining gear hammered into shape. No firm consensus. Just blades that lasted. A fillet knife hangs from a peg behind the fire. Its edge is thin. Too thin now. The tip is bent, the blade dulled from being dragged through sinew and bone again and again. It's good for trimming mold from cheese, scraping residue from pans, maybe for whittling dry bread to fit a cracked tin plate. A pair of tongs sit on the table beside the fire. They don't match. One side is longer than the other. The ends are bent slightly, maybe to grip bacon better, maybe from being stepped on. The cook uses them now to lift a slab of meat from the coals. He doesn't use a glove, just thick hands. The heat doesn't seem to bother him anymore. You watch as he lays the meat on a metal plate. The juices spill over the edge. The tongs leave a streak of black ash behind. He sets them aside on the only clean cloth in the room, folded, stained, barely white. Near the edge of the counter sits a hand crank grinder. It's bolted to a table leg. The cook feeds a chunk of jerky into it, turns the handle with a steady rhythm, and watches as threads of shredded meat fall into a bowl below. The teeth of the grinder squeak once. He oils it with bacon fat, then resumes. You shift your gaze to the corner where baking pans are stacked. They're warped from uneven heat. Most are bent. The bottoms bow outward. The edges have been hammered flat again and again. Some are marked with initials likely stolen from one cook by another, reclaimed in a poker game passed through generations of bad meals. One pan holds a mix of cornbread batter. The cook pours it slowly, using a wooden spoon with half its handle scorched away. The spoon has no curve left, just a flattened scoop. It works well enough. Next to the pans, a row of tin mugs, all mismatched, all dented. You pick one up and turn it in your hands. The rim is jagged in one spot. It's been filed down, but not well. It could still cut a lip if you weren't careful. Above, suspended from an old broom handle nailed to the ceiling, are ladles, spatulas, forks, all hanging from bits of rope and wire. They swing slightly whenever someone walks past. A small pot with a broken handle rests on the stove. It's still in use. The cook grips it with a rag. He doesn't need the handle. He just pours carefully. In the far corner of the room stands a flour sifter. Metal mesh, bent frame, crank worn smooth. It sifts unevenly now. Sometimes not at all. The cook uses his fingers to push the lumps through when the sifter fails. On a nail above the door, a rusted grater, used more for scraping mold off cheese than anything else. No one grates vegetables here. You spot a butter churn in the corner. Dry. Empty. Probably hasn't been used in months. Butter is rare here. When it comes, it's gone fast. The churn remains as decoration. A memory. You hear the cook pick up the cleaver. He drops it with a thud onto the block. Splits a joint. Wipes the blade on his apron. Resets the cleaver. Next to the fire, he flips the skillet with a hand-toss motion. The handle sizzles where it meets the flame. He doesn't flinch. The kitchen here is quiet. Not because it's idle. Because it doesn't need words. Each tool knows its task. Each dent has a story. And every meal begins and ends with these battered, faithful things. You settle back into your chair, hands resting on your knees. The sounds of clattering cutlery and scraping chairs forming a quiet rhythm around you. The saloon has dimmed further. The lanterns now glow low and warm, their light casting flickering shapes across the warped floor and up the cracked walls. The fire pops in the hearth. Outside, the wind whistles gently under the doorframe. Somewhere a coyote howls. Your stomach isn't full exactly, but it's occupied. You glance down the length of the bar where a woman in a pale apron walks out from the kitchen carrying a tray. On it sit 3 small metal plates, each one bearing a slumped mound of food that against all odds tries to resemble dessert. You watch with interest as the plates are delivered to 3 men seated along the wall. The first man receives 2 flapjacks stacked loosely, slightly burned at the edges. They glisten faintly under the lantern light. Syrup clings to the surface, thick, dark, uneven. He cuts in with a fork. The knife isn't sharp enough, so he presses. The stack resists. He tries again. It finally gives. The bite enters his mouth. He chews slowly, then swallows without expression. Flapjacks in the Wild West were not delicate things. They weren't fluffy or golden or soaked in butter. They were dense, gritty, sometimes tough enough to patch a boot. Made with cornmeal or flour or a mix of both, they relied on baking soda or sour milk to rise. Most didn't. Burned bottoms were common. Uncooked centers, too. Historians still debate whether flapjacks were ever intended as dessert or simply the last food served when meat ran out. Some claim they were meant to stretch the flour supply. Others suggest cooks hoped the char would mask the flavor of stale eggs. Either way, they were served hot. Always hot. Not to enhance flavor, but to soften texture. You take a few steps forward and glance at the second man's plate. Molasses candy. 3 lumps, dark and sticky, pressed into crooked rectangles and dusted with flour to prevent sticking. It glistens in the light like wet bark. The man picks up one piece, holds it to his nose, then pops it into his mouth. He chews and chews. His jaw slows. He looks forward, expressionless. Molasses candy was made by boiling molasses until it threatened to harden, then pouring it into pans to cool and slicing it with whatever tool was close. Sometimes a slab was pulled by hand until it lost its gloss. Sometimes it was simply cut and served warm. When cold, it turned to rock. The molasses used out here wasn't sweet like today. It had a bite. It clung to your teeth and your fingers and your memory. The third plate draws your gaze. It holds what might once have been a peach pie. The crust is lopsided. The filling has leaked out from the side and formed a hardened puddle on the tin. A single peach slice clings to the top like a fallen leaf. The man pokes it with a fork. The crust resists. He lifts a bite to his mouth, chews once, twice, then pauses. He swallows. Then he eats another. The pie here isn't flaky. It's thick, possibly made with lard, possibly not made with anything at all except desperation and habit. The filling came from a tin soft peaches soaked in syrup. If lucky, the cook strained the juice. If not, the bottom of the crust is soggy. Pie was a symbol in these saloons. When a pie appeared, it meant something extra had come in a fruit shipment, a tin crate, a trade with someone passing through. You didn't ask for pie. You waited to see who got it first. You lean on the bar and look toward the kitchen. The cook is slicing more pieces. The knife drags through the crust, lifts each wedge onto a saucer, and places it on the tray. The rhythm is slow, careful. You can see him choose which pieces to serve and which to save. A boy walks out carrying 2 more plates. One goes to a woman in the corner. The other goes to a man who traded a bag of potatoes earlier. You understand now. Pie is a currency. The cook sets the tray down and wipes his hands. He doesn't look up. You return to your seat. A plate arrives in front of you without a word. It's flapjacks. 1 large, 1 small, both uneven. A line of syrup stretches across them, already hardening. You pick up your fork. You cut a wedge. The texture is dense, gritty. The inside is warm, but only barely. The outside is dry. You chew slowly. The syrup tastes of smoke, not sugar. You eat it anyway. A man beside you stirs a spoon into a tin cup. Inside is dried apple soaked in warm water. Rehydrated fruit. The apple slices wobble slightly. He sips the liquid, eats a slice, nods. Another version of dessert. Behind the counter, a small bowl holds what looks like ginger snaps. They're chipped, burned, cracked down the middle. A sign nearby says 2 cents. You wonder who pays. You wonder who made them. The barkeep walks by and places another plate in front of someone across the room. A slab of cornbread drenched in milk. Possibly sweetened. Possibly not. It counts as dessert here. A woman at the next table unwraps something from a cloth bundle. It's a piece of sweetbread from home. She eats it slowly. The others watch. No one asks for a bite. Not all desserts here are sweet. Not all are food. Some are just moments. A slow chew. A warm bite. A rare softness in a hard place. You finish your flapjacks. Your jaw is tired, but you feel something like comfort. And that's enough. You lean back in your chair, one hand resting against the edge of the table, the other holding your empty tin fork. Your plate is clean now, save for a few stray crumbs and a sticky corner of syrup hardened into the metal. The saloon quiets further. Outside, the wind whistles again. The sound feels softer now, less of a threat, more of a lull. Then you hear a voice call out, "What's for the 4th?" There's a pause, some laughter. The barkeep replies flatly, "Salted ham if it doesn't turn. Maybe pickles, maybe lemonade." No one disagrees. You realize the question is serious. The 4th of July is coming. Even out here in this town with a half-built post office and a crooked flagpole, folks mark the day. And food, whatever can be scraped together, is the centerpiece. You glance toward the back wall, where a poster hangs, Independence Day Gathering. Music, drink, supper, fire. The ink is faded, the edges curled, but it's enough to stir memories of past celebrations. Special occasion meals in Wild West saloons didn't resemble feasts from polished kitchens. They weren't lavish or layered, but they were real. And when the date came, be it July 4th, Christmas Eve, or a local wedding, the cook scraped his stores, cleaned his tools, and boiled the better cuts. You move toward the bar as a man sets down a fresh plate. Ham. Cold, thick sliced, rubbed with mustard seeds. The fat has congealed into a pale ring around each slice. He stabs one with a fork and eats it without hesitation. Salted ham was celebration food. When stored properly, it could last months. Hung in a cool cellar soaked in brine and spiced just enough to fool the nose. Boiled, roasted, or sometimes just served cold with bread. It was filling, firm, and easy to slice in bulk. Next to him, a woman unwraps a waxed bundle. Inside, a soft wedge of cheese likely saved from a more generous time. She sets it on a cracker, offers none, and chews slowly. Another man nearby pours a glass of lemonade. You stare. The liquid is pale. The ice has mostly melted. You didn't see it arrive. The barkeep notices your look and shrugs. Snow from the mountain brought down yesterday, wrapped in straw. Half of it gone now. Ice. Out here. He pours another glass, the liquid dribbling down the pitcher's side. It smells tart, real lemon juice, possibly imported from California. The taste, probably more sour than sweet. Historians still argue whether lemonade was a luxury or a necessity in desert climates. Some journals describe it as a celebratory treat. Others claim saloons kept it year-round for customers who couldn't stomach alcohol. In either case, it was rare. When ice joined the recipe, it became mythic. The man drinks it slow, savoring. You sit again as more food appears. A small pot of beans, standard. But beside it, a wedge of pie with extra crust. More sugar than usual. Possibly even cinnamon. Someone has roasted corn. It crackles from the fire pit outside where two boys turn the cobs on a spit. The smell is sweet, nutty, earthy. You can hear the kernels pop. Celebrations brought out the good stores, if any existed. They also stretched the ordinary. Cornbread might be served warm with syrup. Bread pudding made from old biscuits rehydrated in milk. Fried apples, sliced thin, coated in sugar, and cooked in lard until golden. You remember one account of a New Year's Day meal in a Kansas saloon. The menu listed cold roast sweet beans, brown bread, vinegar greens, and 2 pickled eggs per man. No music, no dancing, just food. But they remembered it for years. A man sets down his knife and raises a mug. To the Republic he mutters. A few nearby repeat it. Others just lift their cups in silence. You hear a harmonica tune begin. Slow, familiar, untrained. It fills the gaps between chewing, between remembering. More plates arrive. Boiled potatoes, thick-skinned and mealy. A small bowl of pickled cabbage. A jar of molasses passed hand to hand. You see a boy walk in carrying a cake. 2 layers. Lopsided. Topped with crushed nuts and what might be lard frosting. It's not beautiful, but it's enough to hush the room. The cake is placed on the counter. The cook slices it, eyes focused. Each wedge is served on mismatched plates, china, metal, cracked enamel. No one complains. You get your piece. The cake is dense, dark brown, slightly dry at the edge. You bite in. The sweetness is mild, the texture rough, the aftertaste vaguely nutty. You chew carefully. Then again, it's good, or it's just different. And sometimes different is all it takes to mark a celebration. You look around the room. Every table has something extra. A better plate, a fresh fork, a clean napkin. Someone has placed wildflowers in a glass near the door. For one day or one night or one slow meal, the saloon becomes more than a place to eat. It becomes a reason to stay seated, to slow your chewing, to remember the names you forgot and the days you lived through. Someone calls for more ham. The cleaver thuds. The fire crackles. You chew slower. You shift slightly on the hard bench, the wood warm from hours of contact. Your elbows rest on the table's edge, your fingers loose and idle. Across the room, a door creaks open. A man in soiled boots steps in, dust trailing behind him. He removes his hat, nods once at the barkeep, and makes his way toward the back corner, toward the plates reserved for workers. You watch as he's handed a dish without ceremony. No questions, no options, just food. The plate holds a wedge of stale biscuit, a slab of fatback glistening at the edges, and half a boiled potato that's begun to gray. There's a spoonful of beans tucked into the side. Not enough for fullness. Just enough to keep walking. The man doesn't speak. He eats with slow mechanical motions. Each bite the same chew-swallow look down. He is not alone. Another man joins him, shirt torn at the collar, boots split at the toes. He gets the same plate. This is worker food. Saloon kitchens didn't offer menus for the hired hands. There were no selections, no substitutions. If you were hauling hay, mucking stalls, or sweeping floors, you got what was cheapest, quickest, and least likely to be missed. Fatback was common. A cut too greasy and too tough for the regulars. salted to the point of preservation, then fried or boiled until barely chewable. The barkeep sliced it thick, placed it with a practiced hand, and said nothing. The biscuit was older. You could see it in the texture, hard around the edges, crumbly at the center. No butter, no syrup, just dough that once rose and then fell. The potato was lukewarm. You knew because the man poked it and didn't react to the steam. Historians still debate whether workers were fed by courtesy or contract. Some ledgers suggest a deduction from wages for meals served. Others list food as a benefit, a way to keep laborers on site during peak hours. But no one disputes the uniformity: one plate. No seconds. You glance toward the kitchen. The cook slices another piece of fatback. His face is blank. He knows the men by name. He doesn't say them aloud. The boy who bussed the tables earlier returns. He's handed a smaller plate, just beans and a torn biscuit. He takes it to a stool by the wall, sits with his back to the room, and eats quickly. The workers don't linger. There's no time. The stable needs mucking. The barrels need lifting. The firewood won't split itself. Each bite is fuel. That's all. A woman enters through the side door. Her sleeves rolled, her hands red from scrubbing. She's handed a bowl. It holds soup, thin, pale, with one floating vegetable and a small bone. She eats it without complaint. In the far corner, another boy, older, waits for his plate. He's given a heel of bread and a single pickled egg. He cracks the shell, slowly rolls the egg in his palm, then bites it in half. The yolk is firm. The vinegar is strong. These were the meals given, not served. If there were extra beans, you got more. If there was only broth, you dipped bread. If you complained, you ate later. Maybe. You shift your gaze back to the table of laborers. One man sips from a tin cup. It's not whiskey, just broth, cooled and thin. He drinks it between bites of dry biscuit, letting the liquid soften the edges. A man with soot on his hands wipes his mouth on his sleeve, stands and leaves. He says nothing. The next in line takes his place. The cycle is silent. It has no rhythm, just repetition. The cook adds more beans to the pot. No salt this time, just water. He stirs, walks away. A pair of boots clatter near the door. A cartwright enters, limping slightly. His hat is bent at the brim. He removes it. He waits. A plate is placed before him, same contents, same shape, same silence. You notice something new on the side table, a crust of cheese, just a sliver. The cook must have scraped the wheel. The barkeep doesn't charge. He just nods once, slow. The man eats the cheese last. It's dry, sharp. He closes his eyes while chewing. It's a moment, not a meal. A moment. One man dips his biscuit into a tin of grease before eating. Another wipes his fork and pockets it. He'll need it later. Outside, the light fades. The air cools. The wind picks up again. Inside, the plates keep moving. The food does not change. But it keeps coming. Because work keeps coming. You draw your hand along the edge of the table as you stand again. The worn wood is warm, polished, smooth by years of elbows and plates and mugs. You shift your weight, listening to the floor creak beneath your boots. A low voice behind you laughs, and you turn slightly. At the far end of the room, near the stairs leading to the upper quarters, a group of women sit together. They occupy a small side table with a lace-trimmed cloth spread carefully across its surface. The corners are pinned with spoons, to keep them from lifting in the evening breeze. The women wear long skirts, faded blouses, and aprons creased with folds. Their hair is tied back, their sleeves pushed up. Some glance toward the kitchen. Others speak in hushed tones. Their plates are already on the table. You move closer slowly, careful not to disturb them. One woman glances up, then back down again. Her fork glides across her plate without pause. You see what they're eating. Slices of chicken pie carefully cut. The crust is thick and pale, folded unevenly at the edge. You can tell it was hand-rolled, likely in haste. The filling is visible, where the crust has torn open shreds of chicken bits of carrot. Pale gravy hardened near the lip of the plate. One woman has a piece of cornbread beside her plate. She breaks it carefully, dipping it into the filling between bites. Another holds a tin cup of tea light in color, maybe brewed from dried mint or lemongrass. She sips slowly, pinky extended, just slightly. This is the food served to women who work in the saloon, servers, maids, performers. Not customers, not travelers. They eat on real china when it's clean, with spoons that match and plates that carry more than one item. You notice small jars scattered between the dishes. One holds pickled beets, another yellowing apple slices. A third has something orange and fibrous, possibly squash. The pickles are shared. Each woman takes a few, then passes the jar quietly. Dessert is visible on one of the side plates, a wedge of pound cake, dense and pale. The top has browned and cracked slightly. No frosting, no fruit, just cake. A fork presses into the slice. It yields easily. You glance back toward the main bar. The food served there is simpler, rougher, hotter. The difference is clear. These meals are prepared with just a hint of care. Historians often question whether saloon women ate better than the cowboys and laborers around them. Some diaries describe fresh eggs, warm bread, and stewed vegetables. Others tell of stolen meals, crusts saved in handkerchiefs, and spoons licked clean in secret. No agreement exists. What's clear is that women ate differently. Their portions were smaller, the dishes less greasy, the presentation more deliberate. One woman at the table opens a cloth pouch and removes a wedge of cheese. It's pale yellow, pressed flat. She cuts it in two and offers half to her neighbor. The other woman accepts without thanks. Across the table, someone lifts a napkin to her mouth and dabs at a corner. You watch as another stands. She picks up her plate, carries it toward the kitchen, and returns with a second helping. This time just cornbread and tea. She sits, exhales through her nose, and begins again. Their conversation is low and steady. Names are spoken, places remembered, weather mentioned. No one speaks of customers. A girl not yet 20 enters through the side door. She carries a folded apron in one hand, her eyes darting across the floor. She approaches the table. A seat opens. She takes it. A plate arrives. The same chicken pie. The same pickles. A spoon set neatly beside the napkin. Her hands tremble slightly as she eats the first bite. No one notices, or everyone does, but says nothing. At the edge of the table sits an older woman. Her hair is tied with a ribbon. Her fingers are stained with soap and dust. Her plate holds only bread and broth. She eats slowly, eyes focused on her bowl. Someone reaches across and slides her a slice of cake. She pauses, then nods. Food here is not abundant, but among women it is shared. One woman unwraps a tin of preserved strawberries. Just a spoonful. She eats directly from the tin, eyes closed. Another leans forward, slices a peach in two, and offers the pit to the cook's daughter who's been watching from the stairs. The girl accepts quietly. Even with little, the table holds balance. The conversation lulls. One woman hums softly. You step away, giving them space. As you return to your seat, you carry the image with you. A table set with soft voices, slower forks and plates that hold not just food, but care. You ease back into your usual seat near the window, its pane warped by years of prairie wind and heat. Dust coats the frame. Beyond it, the land stretches flat and empty, the horizon drawing a straight line of brown against pale blue. The town's saloon, like most, stands as the only real gathering point within miles. But you know this saloon doesn't tell the whole story. You remember the meals from Dodge City, different, smokier, heavier on the beef. You think about the long ride north toward Montana where the food changed with the air. Saloons weren't the same everywhere. You close your eyes and picture the table back in Leadville closer to the mines higher in elevation. The bread there was denser, baked harder. Rye, if you were lucky. Sourdough if someone from San Francisco had moved in nearby. Cornbread faded out as wheat moved in. A man near you now is finishing a trout. The bones glisten on his plate picked clean. You smell the faint whiff of lemon. Not fresh, dried and soaked, but still lemon. He's from the north, probably, somewhere near the Rockies where trout lived in every stream and cold creeks made ice a possibility. He eats with the precision of someone who's filleted fish before. Not a visitor, a local. You glance toward the bar where a pair of ranchers sit. One drinks coffee. The other pours vinegar over his beans, a habit more common down south. He sips the liquid like it's normal. To him it is. The barkeep watches, says nothing. In New Mexico territory, saloon food leaned into chilies, dried red ones, crushed green, beans cooked with spice, bread fried in lard. You'd walk in and taste heat before sitting down. Meat was stewed until tender. Tortillas sometimes replaced biscuits. You don't see that here, but you've seen it there. Historians agree that saloon food was shaped by the land, by who moved through it, and by who stayed. In Texas, beef ruled. In Kansas, it was pork. In Colorado, venison. Near the coast, salted fish. And in towns settled by immigrants, food bent around new traditions. You think of the German saloon outside of Omaha, the one that served sausage, real sausage, dense, spiced, tied with twine. The cook there brewed his own beer. Fermented cabbage sat in crocks near the fire. Rye bread was thick and seeded. Even the mustard burned your nose. You remember eating there once. The meal came with potatoes, mashed, creamy, real cream, possibly the best you'd had in months. But the further west you traveled, the thinner the fare became. You remember a saloon near Carson City. There bread was mostly air. Beans came without salt. The meat was rabbit every day. The cook said nothing. Just scooped and moved on. And further south in the Arizona heat, meals arrived lukewarm. The kitchens weren't inside. They were behind the building, open to the wind, the flies, and the ash. Water boiled too fast. Firewood burned too slow. You saw one saloon serve cold rice pudding made from leftover biscuit crumbs and goat's milk. You ate it all. The barkeep hands a man beside you a bowl of stew. It's darker than usual, the scent stronger. You ask where the meat came from. Goat, he says. From down Tucson way. You nod. Goat wasn't common up here, but it made its way up in wagons, salted or stewed. The flavor lingered. A little sweet, a little gamey. At the far table, someone picks at boiled barley, unusual here. More likely found where colder weather pushed corn out of reach. The man eats it with a spoon, adds molasses, and calls it breakfast. You think about how the menus shift along the trails. Same dishes, different accents. In Utah, the biscuits are thicker. In Nevada, they're fried. In Wyoming, sometimes there are no biscuits at all, just cornmeal mash spooned onto tin plates and served with pickled turnips. You reach for your coffee lukewarm now. It tastes the same as always, but somewhere else the same cup would hold chicory or roasted barley. A merchant walks in and orders tea. The barkeep frowns. Which kind, black if you've got it? He nods and pours from a kettle behind the bar. The cup steams faintly. The scent rises earthy strong. The man sips and says, "Better than Cheyenne." The barkeep shrugs. "You should see it in Elko," he replies. Another regional difference. Even the tea has a story. At the wall behind you, a small sign hangs. No credit, no seconds, no questions. It doesn't mention the food. Because everyone knows it changes. From one rail stop to the next. From prairie to pass. From saloon to saloon. You finish your coffee. It tastes like where you are. Nowhere else. You stand again, legs stiff from sitting too long, and drift toward the back corner where the air is cooler and the oil lamp casts long shadows up the wall. The room has thinned out, but the smell of cooked fat lingers hanging in the boards and clinging to the fabric of every coat. A new plate arrives at the end of the bar. You glance over. It isn't beef. It isn't pork. It's unfamiliar. Long, slender pieces in a thick reddish broth, the surface shimmering with grease. You watch as the customer spears a strip and lifts it to his mouth. He chews slowly, chews again, then swallows. He doesn't comment. The barkeep nods to someone behind the bar and mutters, "Rattlesnake." You blink once, then lean slightly closer. Rattlesnake gumbo, if it can be called that. Chopped into sections, boiled, then stewed with peppers, onion, and something sour, maybe vinegar, maybe wild herbs. The broth is oily, red-tinged thick. Bones are visible in the bottom of the bowl. The meat has a texture that falls somewhere between chicken and regret. The man eats with both hands, wiping his mouth with the back of his sleeve. No ceremony, no complaints. Rattlesnake was food for the desperate, but also a delicacy in some corners of the frontier. It depended on how it was caught, cleaned, and cooked. Historians still argue whether it was ever intended for public consumption in saloons, or if it showed up only when supplies ran low and options ran out. But recipes exist. Journal entries mention the chew, the aftertaste, the moment of hesitation before the first bite. Beside you, another customer receives a bowl of stew. You glance over again. Muskrat. You see it in the shape of the haunch, the dark meat pulled from the leg, the thin skin seared and half curled back. The smell is strong, earthy, muddy, oily. You don't look away. Muskrat was a swamp meat, found in the marshlands, trapped skinned, gutted, boiled, often served with gravy to disguise the scent. It was lean, slightly sweet, but carried the memory of the water it came from. Some cooks soaked it in milk. Others boiled it with garlic. Most just hoped no one asked. The barkeep offers cornbread on the side. It's dry, but with muskrat it helps. At the far table, a man unwraps a parcel brought from the back room. Inside are dumplings, lumpy, boiled, slick with grease. He opens them to reveal something dark and unfamiliar. Prairie dog. You stare longer than you mean to. The pieces are small bone-in, nestled inside a gravy made from beans and bacon drippings. The dumpling holds everything together. Meat marrow mystery. The smell is not pleasant, but it's warm. That's enough. Prairie dog meat was uncommon in more populated saloons, but on the open plains it filled the pot when nothing else did. Meat was meat. You caught what moved. You boiled what you caught. The barkeep says nothing as another man orders the same. You wonder how it tastes. In the corner, an older man with a white beard sits with a plate of something fried. The skin is crisp, the meat beneath it dark. He chews slowly, thoughtfully, dipping each bite in a small dish of red sauce. You ask what it is. Crow, he answers. Shot this morning. Cook cleaned it proper. He keeps eating. You've heard of crow being served in saloons during hard winters. Tough, stringy, but better than boiled leather. Cooked long enough it stopped fighting. Dressed with vinegar or fried crisp it passed for poultry just barely. A woman at the bar sips broth from a tin mug. Inside small bones, thin strips of meat. Her spoon clinks the side. She swallows and sets the mug down. Squirrel, she says. Tasted better when I was younger. No one laughs. Squirrel meat was considered fair game, literally. Trapped in the woods, boiled, whole-skinned, fast. Not much meat on one, but 3 or 4 made a stew. Cooked down it shredded. With onions it passed for rabbit. With flour it made gravy. Another customer unwraps something from a cloth bundle. Frog legs. You see them. Pale. Fried. Bent at the joint. He bites in, pulls meat from the bone, and nods once. Frontier folk ate what was near. And what was near walked, crawled, slithered, or swam. Unusual meats were not novelty here. They were just meals. The cook lifts a pan from the stove, wipes it with a dry cloth, and begins slicing something else. You recognize the shape, a roasted lizard. Not large. Possibly iguana. The skin peels back like parchment. The meat underneath is gray and fibrous. No one watches. No one flinches. You return to your seat and glance at your empty plate. Beans. Bread. Pork fat. You thought that was rough. You were wrong. Another plate arrives beside you. A spoonful of gravy. A bite of something sinewy. You lift it with a fork. Chew. Swallow. You don't ask what it is. You just eat. You sit very still, now the room's rhythm slowing to a crawl around you. The fire in the hearth has dropped to embers. A low wind hums through the cracks in the wall. Someone coughs near the piano. Another shifts in their seat, their boot dragging faintly across the wooden floor. A plate is cleared near the bar. The man who ate from it looks pale. He stands, wobbles once, then grabs the back of a chair to steady himself. His face twists, pain, discomfort. Maybe worse. The barkeep watches him silently. A pause. Then the man stumbles toward the door, muttering something about needing air. You follow him with your eyes until he vanishes into the dark. The barkeep exhales. That was the eggs, he mutters. A few heads turn. Eggs in a Wild West saloon were always a risk. They arrived by rail or wagon, packed in straw, nestled in crates that sometimes spent 3 days too long under the sun. There was no refrigeration, no real test beyond smell and luck. Historians still debate how often food poisoning occurred in frontier saloons. Diaries mention bellyache gripings, the shakes, and sudden weakness, but few use modern language. Some suggest spoiled eggs and rancid butter were common. Others claim saloon keepers were cautious enough not to serve what might cause trouble. But caution didn't always win. The barkeep wipes his hands on his apron and calls to the back. No more eggs tonight. The cook shouts something that might be a curse. You glance toward the kitchen. The smell coming from the stove is sharp, burnt, and slightly sour. Something oily has gone past its time. A man at the next table picks at a slice of meat. His brow furrows. He chews once, then stops. He sets his fork down, pushes the plate away. Smells like Tuesday, he mutters. Someone nearby laughs, dry, humorless. The cook doesn't hear. On the far wall, a man stands suddenly. His face is pale. He walks slowly toward the back door. Someone follows. A few quiet words are exchanged. Then the door opens, closes. No one else moves. The barkeep pulls a small jar from under the counter. Inside are dried herbs. He spoons a pinch into a tin cup, adds hot water, and slides it to a seated customer. Tonic, he says. The man drinks. The taste is bitter, likely willow bark, maybe licorice root, anything to calm the gut. Food poisoning here wasn't dramatic. No sirens, no white coats. Just a long night. A cold floor. Sometimes worse. You recall stories told by travelers, accounts of spoiled milk and coffee, of gray pork belly served too late, of canned tomatoes that hissed when opened. You look down at your own plate, just crumbs now, but still you wonder. A man at the bar requests vinegar. The barkeep hesitates, then pours a half cup. The man drinks it slowly, cuts the sour, he says. Another calls for whiskey, not to enjoy, but to chase whatever just sat wrong in his belly. The whiskey's poured. He downs it fast, slams the cup down, wipes his mouth. You look to the floor near the kitchen. A pan sits there unused. Its surface is coated in something that once might have been stew. Now it's stiff, dark around the edges. The smell is faint but wrong. No one moves it. Another man enters from outside. His walk is slow, careful. He sits without speaking. The barkeep offers him broth. The man waves it off. You glance again at the empty chair left behind by the man who'd eaten the eggs. It hasn't been filled. The cook opens a new sack flour. The top is clumpy. He reaches in, pulls out a handful. sniffs, shakes his head, sets it aside. It will still be used, just not tonight. Supplies here are precious, even the ones that make you sick. A boy walks in holding a tin plate. On it, leftover beans. He eats without sitting, stands near the fire chewing slowly. The room watches him. He swallows. Nothing happens. Someone exhales. You rise and walk toward the bar. The barkeep is still mixing a second tonic, this one cloudy gray with herbs floating near the top. You ask what's in it. Chamomile, he says. Juniper. Bit of salt. You ask if it helps. He shrugs. Sometimes. You nod. Step back. Sit down again. The room returns to its silence. Someone finishes their coffee. Someone else pushes their plate away. The food hasn't changed, but now it feels heavier. You chew nothing, and still your stomach tightens. You stay seated, hands still, breath slow. The warmth from the nearby hearth no longer feels comforting, just heavy. You listen to the soft scrape of forks against tin, the shallow clink of mugs being nudged across the bar. No new plates appear. Not for a while. A man near the end of the bar leans back in his chair. He folds his arms and mutters not loudly but clearly enough. That wasn't chuck wagon cooking. That was guesswork. Someone at a nearby table chuckles dry and slow. You ever eat out of a real chuck wagon? The second man asks. More than once, the first replies. And never got sick from beans. You catch the glance they exchange. It's not heated. It's not friendly either. It's the beginning of a conversation that has happened 100 times in saloons like this one and will happen 100 more. What was saloon food really? The room listens now. Even the barkeep pauses as he wipes a cup. I say the second man continues. Most of what you see served in these places comes straight from the trail. Chuck wagon fair beans, bacon dried apples, biscuits. The first man shakes his head. Maybe once. Not anymore. Not since the rail. He gestures toward the wall where a broken clock ticks unevenly. Food's changed. These saloons serve whatever they can buy cheap. Freight crates full of tins and scraps and leftover cuts from the butcher. The debate has begun. Historians still argue the same thing. Whether the food served in frontier saloons grew directly out of chuck wagon cooking or if it evolved into something else entirely once trade lines improved. Journals from the 1860s describe meals on the open prairie stewed beans with salt pork, hard biscuits baked over campfires, coffee boiled in soot-blackened pots. But diaries from 1880 mention canned oysters, tomato preserves and molasses candy served from behind polished bars in towns near the railroad. The older man speaks again. Chuck wagon meals had rhythm. Wake up, eat beans and biscuits, work. Dinner was stew, maybe beef, maybe not. But it was hot. It was clean. Clean the other interrupts. You ever see the cook's hands? More laughter. Still the conversation holds. Someone near the fireplace joins in. Wasn't about clean. Was about knowing what you were eating. These days, you don't know what meat's in the stew. A man across the room raises his mug and calls, "That stew tasted like belt leather." He drinks. No one disagrees. You turn your head slowly. Around the room, you see the signs. Empty plates with scraps too strange to name. Bowls of gravy congealing at the edges. Forks laid down with finality. This meal came from nowhere in particular. It borrowed from chuck wagons, yes, from the open fire, the tinware, the lard. But it also carried something newer. Freighted goods, tinned fruit, vinegar brines. The cook steps out from the back, wiping his hands on a cloth already stiff with grease. He hears the talk. He doesn't speak. He walks past the bar, grabs a mug, fills it with something dark, and sits at a stool near the window. The room quiets again. Someone coughs. Another voice speaks low. My brother says his saloon in Missouri serves fried ham with green beans and corn pudding. Someone answers. And it's probably cooked by Germans. You glance toward the ceiling where dried herbs still hang wilting, now their leaves curled inward. They're more decoration than use. At the back table, a man turns to his companion. Saw a place in California, served real pie with butter crust and sugar. The other man stares at him. Then why'd you come back? He shrugs. Didn't feel right. You understand. Saloons serve what people accept. Sometimes that means hard biscuits and beans without salt. Other times it means meat with no name. The barkeep leans on the bar. People come in here expecting stew. If it's hot, they eat it. If it's not, they drink. You nod. That's the truth. It's not about where the food came from. It's about what's left at the end of the day. The cook stands, tosses the rag aside, and disappears behind the curtain. Plates are cleared slowly. Mugs are stacked. Voices fall back into a rhythm of sleep and fatigue. The fire has shrunk to coals. Someone near the door speaks once more. Chuck wagon food filled your belly. Saloon food fills your time. No one argues. Not tonight. You sit still, your arms crossed, now your back resting against the wall's cool surface. The lamplight glows soft flickering more than before. Outside, the wind has calmed. A faint creaking in the rafters joins the room's quiet rhythm. No one speaks. No new plates are served. The barkeep has stopped pouring. A man across the room leans forward, elbows on his knees, voice low and steady. Saloons used to feed better. Another voice answers. Used to serve less poison, you mean? There's no laughter. Just the sound of slow chewing from a man finishing cold beans with his fingers. You watch as the last plates are collected. The barkeep wipes them once, then stacks them behind the counter. The pile grows. None will be washed tonight. Not fully. Just scraped, wiped, and reused. You glance at the food crates near the door, emptier now. The sack of beans leans inward. The flour barrel is nearly dry. One wheel of cheese remains split down the middle with a visible crack. You understand. The age of the saloon is changing. Railroads stretch further west now. Trains bring uniform crates of food wrapped in paper labeled in ink. Meat comes salted, smoked, tinned, wrapped in cloth. Even the vinegar is clear. Meals are starting to look alike. Once this saloon served what it could grow or catch. Now it serves what it shipped. The food is still greasy, still gray, but the mystery is vanishing. You hear the barkeep talking to a traveler. Said in Fort Worth they got menus now, printed ones. The traveler nods. Heard they plate the food too. The barkeep frowns. What for? Another man calls from his corner. So you can tell what you're eating. The barkeep shrugs. takes the guesswork out. But guesswork was part of it. That's fading. Soon the beans will all taste the same. The biscuits will come from sacks marked premix. The meat will be labeled, verified. Boneless, safe. And with that, safety will come sameness. You stare at your empty plate and remember the bread. Lumpy, dry, uneven, but real. No mold tonight. Just heat and weight. You remember the stew. Brown, unidentifiable. It burned your tongue, but it filled your stomach. You remember the molasses candy? Tough, sticky, slightly sour, and the sound it made when your teeth cracked through it. You remember the pie, uneven crust, strange sweetness. You'd eat it again. These meals weren't good, but they were alive. You look toward the fire. It's nearly out now. The cook has gone upstairs. The barkeep leans on the counter. The room is dim. Outside the town is quieter than it was. You close your eyes. You hear a chair scrape, a mug clink, a boot step across dry floor. It's ending now. Not just the meal, but the moment. The food will return tomorrow. It always does. But it won't always be this. It won't always be lard-fried bread in cracked pans. It won't always be stew without a name. It won't always be pie served without apology. And when it changes, you'll notice. You always do. The fire hums once more. The last plate is gone. And the saloon goes quiet. The room grows still. The lantern flame near the bar trembles slightly, shrinking as the oil fades. A few final voices murmur low and tired before trailing off. The door no longer opens. The boots no longer echo across the boards. The air inside thickens with warmth and stillness. Even the piano has fallen silent, the final note resting somewhere between key and memory. In the far corner, the ashes in the hearth shift gently, a last curl of smoke rising toward the ceiling beams above. You close your eyes. There's nothing left to chew, nothing left to sip. Only the fading scent of baked bread, of cooled stew, of salt and smoke and fire. The same smells that linger in the wood, in the aprons, in the walls. You imagine the plates cleaned just enough to use again. You imagine the boy sweeping quietly before sleep. You imagine the cook upstairs, boots still on head, pressed to a pillow made of old flour sacks. Tomorrow it will begin again. The pan will sizzle. The kettle will steam. The same spoon will stir the same beans, and the barkeep will count out the same sugar cubes with the same 2 fingers. But tonight, everything is quiet. No chewing, no laughter, no scraping. Just the soft tick of a warped clock on the wall and the sigh of wind outside the shuttered window. You let the heaviness settle in your arms, in your chest, behind your eyes. No need to move. No need to speak. Sleep waits just past the door, and the saloon will still be here when you wake.